Let's get it. And a good afternoon. Picks and roll right here on The Gambler. You are looking live. Sean Barnard, all things NBA and Sixers insider for us on The Gambler. I am Sean Brace. As always, all podcasts available at foxphlgambler.com. Please give us a follow on all of our socials and subscribe to that YouTube channel, Fox Sports The Gambler. Sean Barnard, Sixers back in action this evening, taking on the Toronto Raptors, a team that they just beat on Saturday night by 7 points right here at DraftKings Sportsbook. You be sure to use Brace as the promo code, all you new users out there. Sixers favored by 8 at home this evening. I want to jump right into it. We got a lot to discuss from yesterday and some trade potential as far as target is concerned out there for the Sixers. So we got a lot to discuss, but immediately, where are you at right now about tonight's game? Because the Sixers, as I said, won last time that they played on Saturday. Thought they looked really well against Toronto. Nick Nurse obviously knows the team. And, oh, by the way, Toronto played last night, beating the Milwaukee Bucks 130-108. Your thoughts on the point spread this evening? Where you at?
Yeah, I feel good about them taking care of business. That this does have the look of a Sixers team that looks more locked in, more determined on a night-to-night basis. Obviously, still very early in the season. Feels good that they've had a couple days off. They're going to be fresh. I'm excited to watch them again. We're going to get a look at the new faces that Nick Batum is out for personal reasons that he won't be playing tonight, but it sounds like all the other guys will have the green light. So we'll get a new look at Robert Covington in uniform, Marcus Morris in uniform, maybe KJ Martin if Nick Nurse wants to roll the dice, see what he's got. So I do hope each of those guys get a little bit of opportunity tonight. I'm looking forward to that. And as a whole, this is pretty much the same team. That these are all added pieces. That outside of PJ Tucker, Sixers didn't really lose anything, just brought in some new bodies. So I think the vibes are high, and I think they're ready to take care of business tonight.
You know that Shannon Sharp video meme where he was on Undisputed with Skip and he sips the Mountain Dew. He's like, that's where I'm at right now with all these new names. Yeah, right. Now we'll see. It's fun. I'll definitely be tuned in. And from the point spread perspective, no doubt about it, I think the Sixers will handle business. Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, ended up losing to Portland. And we saw what the Sixers did to Portland. I know you can't really go down that path, but still. As I said, though, the big talking point is Toronto. Not exactly the freshest team. Again, coming in off the road here, where they took on, or excuse me, they were home versus Milwaukee, ended up winning 130-111. And the big scorer for last night was Siakam with 26. And again, this team had success on Saturday. Anything changing over Toronto since the last time we've seen them with the 2 games that they played since then?
Yeah, nothing too much. They're kind of a team that they're going to be hot and cold from the perimeter, especially. They don't have a ton of shooting on that team. They added Grady Dick through the draft this year, which helps in that regard, but they're still a team that points are sometimes hard to come by with the way this roster is structured, with these positionless guys who aren't really offensive first in their nature. When we're talking about OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, even Pascal Siakam, I would include in that category of they have to really work to get their points. Scotty Barnes did shoot the ball well last night, so he's got a little bit of a hot stride going into this one. But for the most part, I think that's going to be the issue with the Raptors throughout the length of the season. It's just going to be a struggle to score points for stretches. I think the Sixers are going to be ready to lock things up defensively in the same way they did the first time these guys played each other. And I still don't see an answer for Tyrese Maxey, just like the first time that these two teams played.
Tyrese Maxey has gone, well, tonight it's 23.5. I'm seeing a DraftKings Sportsbook point total. He's gone over that total all 3 games. He finished with 24 the last game, correct? I know he went 30 and 30. I think 24 last time out. And Julian Edler from DraftKings joined me yesterday, and he said that Maxey has gone over his player combo, the points, rebounds, and assist total in all 3 games so far this season. That's at 33.5 this evening. As far as Maxey is concerned with those 2 markets, are you going over? I highly doubt you're taking the under, but the player combo, where do you stand on that one?
Yeah, the combo I like better is just the straight up points and assists, which is back down to 29.5 on DraftKings for this game. I was surprised to see that because that's what it was to start the season, which I was all over. And then it inflated, I believe, it's at 33.5 for the 3rd game of the season that they played. But it did drop back down to 29.5 for this matchup. Not really sure what the reasoning for that kind of drop, kind of surprising that amount of movement. But either way, I think that's worth hopping on tonight. And I think that is the best way to bet Maxey right now, because I think there could be a slant where the Raptors try and make him a playmaker. And so far, he's stepped up to the challenge with that. A nice 20-10 game gets the job done and clears that 29.5 there. And he always has the opportunity and really likelihood of going on a spurt where he can just pour in points in a hurry and soar past that number straight up with scoring. He's a guy that is capable of getting 30 on just about an every night basis at this point. So I do like the 29.5 from a combo standpoint. That's probably the way that I would bet it, but I think the points at 23.5 is fair as well.
Joel Embiid, let's move the conversation to the big man. 28.5 here. You got to like that. Again, he can go out there and drop 30. It's just whether or not he will do that here against Toronto. As I said, two teams did just match up on Saturday night, and in that game, Embiid went for 34, 14 of 21, a total of nine rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks. Just a tremendous performance by Joel. Actually, all 3 games. He hasn't had a bad game yet, correct? I mean, the Milwaukee game, it was a little off from what it was. Missed free throws, but still finished with a nice total as far as points are concerned. Joel Embiid, you got to expect for him to go over 28.5 here.
Yeah, I like the 28.5. Pretty much anything under 30 is a good number for Joel Embiid. And I also like the combo for him as well. That the points, rebounds, and assists is where I would lean for Embiid. That's sitting at 44.5 for this matchup at a minus 115 line. He's shown a real commitment to rebounding in a way that he has not in years past to start the season. I do think Nick Nurse is challenging him in that direction. Embiid had 5 offensive rebounds in the last time that he was on the floor, which is something that we don't really see from him. Some of that is schematic in the way that he takes a lot of his shots from the elbow and isn't in position to get an offensive board, but it does feel like he's fighting for it more. He's more committed in that area. So I think his rebounding numbers are going to grow this year, that he took a step back, averaged just 10 rebounds per game last year, which is below the 13 that has kind of been the standard set for his career. So I think that he's going to have a resurgence as a rebounder. And you can even look at the rebounding numbers straight up. That's sitting at 10.5. If he's committed to rebounding, he should be getting that every single night, that he's the biggest guy on the floor. And especially now, not that PJ Tucker was massive in the box score for rebounding, but he was still a guy gobbling up 6 rebounds a game that are now for the taking. So it's kind of on Embiid to grab those. Tobias Harris is not particularly good as a rebounder. D'Anthony Melton, I would probably consider the second best rebounder on the floor for as far as the starters go. So I like Embiid's rebounding, and I do think combos at 44.5 is the way to go.
Let's talk about the K9 himself, Kelly Oubre.
Sure. Yeah.
He's getting a lot of 3-pointers up. Do you expect that to continue? I mean, I think he's probably averaging 4 or 5 attempts per game. So with that usage, I'm looking at his number right now at over 1.5. It's not the best price at minus 135, but for a same game parlay, definitely a guy to take a flyer on, possibly hitting 4. Of course, getting into the crazy world of things, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility that he could knock those down, especially if he's going to get 6 or 7 in a game here. What is your take on Oubre and the expectation as far as him from behind the arc?
Yeah, I like that number as well. He's going to kind of have his audition to stick in the starting lineup tonight. That Nick Nurse is going to slide him in as that 5th starter now that PJ Tucker has been traded and that spot opened up. I don't think that's something that's going to stick in the long term, that I think one of these Clippers pieces will end up securing that, whether that's Covington. I think Batum's probably the most likely of the 3 to get the starting role, but Oubre has earned it to this point. And looking at his numbers specifically, I mean, 12 points, 18 points, and 27 points, a guy that has been lighting it up. He's earned the right to have a chance at the starting spot. So I think he's going to have a little bit of a prove it mentality. Personally, I really like the idea of him coming off the bench, that I think that scoring pop off the bench is the best way to play him and is going to be very vital to this team down the stretch. The Sixers have not had a guy that can just light up the score sheet off the bench in many years. I would even go as far back to Lou Williams as far as a comparison for what I think that he is that level of a scorer. So I do think that he eventually goes back to the bench, but I think tonight that Kelly's going to be focused. He's going to be bought in, and he's not shy about shooting it. So always fun to wager on those numbers.
Kelly Oubre at 15.5 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Went over that number the last time that they played. Again, as I said on Saturday night, he finished with 18 in that game, and he was 0 for 6 from downtown, which is crazy to think about. 0 for 4 his last time out. So maybe we don't want him jacking it up, but I'm with you. 2 parts. I'm with you on both things that you said. Number one, I prefer him off the bench, I think. Mm-hmm. Let's see how it plays out over the next week or so. But in my mind, I think that's everything you just laid out. The pop, he can deliver. A guy to get to the basket, has confidence, not scared to take the shot. So I like that a lot. Having him coming off the bench is definitely a good thing. But at the same time, he's definitely in a position that he can go out there and get it. And why not? Oh, yeah. He talked about that with Shams, right? Where he felt disrespected in the offseason. So here it is. They're making trades. They got all these new pieces coming in. Of course, he knows what's being said and the thought process from the team. I'm sure that they've been somewhat in the communication as well. after the move, like, hey, these guys are going to do it. You got to be honest with it, right? I don't know. I looked at Harden walking into the locker room. I don't know if the Clippers actually knew that the trade went down or not, but nobody was excited at all about that. As far as Oubre tonight is concerned, I think that's a good play from that standpoint, that the mentality will be there to attack when he's out on the floor. So no matter the minutes that he's going to get, he's going to make the most of them. He played probably in the ballpark of 27 and a half as far as average is concerned right now. No, maybe 29. 29 is probably a good number. Where do you think the total will be tonight as far as minute usage?
I think, as I said, I think that today is going to be kind of his audition to see if he can stick with the starters. I do think Nick Nurse tonight is tough to really set expectations based on how much that he trusts or wants to experiment with these new bodies. I do think there's a world where Nick Nurse looks at these guys pregame and says, let's just give them a little more time and keep these guys on the bench tonight, in which case would open up the door for Oubre to get some extended minutes. We'll have some clarity on that during the pregame presser, kind of an outlook on that. But until that point, I would guess that Oubre is probably in the neighborhood of the 25-ish minutes, maybe close to 30. The 25 to 30 range is probably where I throw him, and I think he kind of sticks throughout that for the season. So he could conceivably see a bump if Nurse isn't ready to roll with these new Clippers faces on this roster. But I don't think he sees below 22 is probably the floor for what I would put him on especially tonight, and I think on a pretty much an every night basis.
All things hoops, Sixers focused with Sean Barnard, our Sixers insider on the Gambler Picks and Roll, the podcast. Let's go. Final thoughts on this game, Sean. Go ahead and wax poetic on anything that you're looking forward to seeing. As of course, the number one thing possibly you want to see. And as far as final thoughts, and then we'll get into the Mitchell conversation as well with the trade rumors that are out there.
Yeah, I guess for the most part that I do want to get a look at these new faces that we haven't had exact clarity. None of them are listed on the injury report except for Nick Batum, who will be out for this game. But Robert Covington and Marcus Morris and KJ Martin all seem eager to play a role right away. And I think they all deserve the opportunity to at least see what they can do. I think these guys are more than throw-ins in the way that some people are regarding them, that these guys can contribute. Robert Covington's talking about that he wants to end up as the Sixers all-time leading three-point scorer by the time that he's done here, which I love to hear coming out of his mouth. And he's currently sitting in second. So he has a legitimate chance of that, about 160 three-pointers that he's going to have to knock down with the Sixers to break that record. I'll be rooting for him. It'll be cool to see that him and Joel have that rapport again. Covington talked about how Joel basically started giving him, teasing him right when he walked through the building first things right away yesterday. So I'm happy to see that they're back on the same page. I do think that he can provide some spacing. We'll see what he still has left in the tank defensively. So I guess that's the number one thing that I'll be looking for and hoping for is let's see what we have in these new pieces and let's give them a shot tonight.
Well said. Once again, DraftKings Sportsbook down a tick. They must be listening here. Down to 7.5. The Sixers are favored here at home at the Wells Fargo Center. All right. Let's talk about some of the rumors that are out there. Donovan Mitchell. Wait, what? Love me some Donovan Mitchell. Always have, always will. Really interesting to go back in time and think about the conversations with him and Ben Simmons. Also the debate. Also the debate of Paul George or Ben Simmons. Always fun to dig that one up and where we're at right now. We'll discuss Ben Simmons a little bit later as the Brooklyn Nets ended up winning last night. But Donovan Mitchell, the latest for the 76ers, is this real in your mind? Where did this come from?
So came from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, who is a fairly plugged-in reporter, a guy who is in the know and things. I think what is very clear right now is Donovan Mitchell does not have much of a long-term future in Cleveland. I do think Mitchell's kind of a big market, a Hollywood guy, that's what he really wants is to be playing as the face of a franchise on a big stage. And with that kind of being his outlook, you do have to feel a little bit bad for him that the two organizations he's been a part of have been the Utah Jazz and the Cleveland Cavaliers, which are about as far from a major market that you can get when it comes to an NBA team. There has been no talks of an extension. As of now, his contract situation that he's under contract for this year, he'll be under contract for next year, and then he has a player option for the following year. I don't expect the Cavs to look to move Mitchell until at least after this season. They had a disappointing showing in the postseason last year, but we're not that far removed from them going all in and making this Donovan Mitchell trade. So I think they at least see it out for this year. I think the Cavs did some nice things in the offseason. Max Strus has looked good to start the season. Georges Niang left the Sixers to go to Cleveland, and they do need that shooting that he does provide. And with having the guys, the Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, to really pick up the defensive slack behind Garland and Mitchell, there is in theory, a nice little lineup and rapport here. So we will see how it works. But yeah, I don't think his long-term future is in Cleveland. I think he's pretty much made that clear. So I basically expect them to see out how this season goes. And I think next year is a year where he's more available. The Sixers are a team that are now monitoring the situation, was the phrase that Michael Scotto used. I think really the point of that being is that the Sixers are going to find themselves in just about every trade rumor or a guy on the market moving forward, which it's an exciting spot to be. That it feels a lot better sitting on this side of things rather than all these teams monitoring Joel Embiid, which we see all the time. So I do think that Mitchell's probably the biggest name that has kind of potentially popped to the market at this point in time, but I think there's more names that are going to come.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, where it's like, hey, look, all the big names, chances are if there's a shot, Daryl Morey was already on the phone with them. So, and as he should be. But depends. It depends if the ownership group signs off on it, because apparently they're running the operation here with the Sixers. I don't know. Look, from the Donovan Mitchell stuff, I think you nailed it with, hey, look, from here on out until a trade is done, they're going to be associated with anything. So let's move on. Also from the news yesterday dealing with the 76ers was Daryl Morey saying that, this is going to be a blip on the radar with him and Harden, and he looks forward to being at the Hall of Fame celebration. No doubt about it. James Harden's a Hall of Famer. I don't know if it's a blip on the radar in his mind, but when you really think of it, the latest was that, of course, Josh Harris got on a phone call with Steve Ballmer. Might have been the most awkward phone call in NBA history. Would have loved to have been on a fly on the wall there. As long as they're not shaking hands, right? Over the phone, it can only be so awkward. But I don't know. Like, to me, of course, Daryl Morey can't go out. Let's start with this. Of course, there was something that was promised. It wasn't delivered. Daryl Morey loves him some James Harden. Crossing brought out an article about him looking at this picture apparently on his wall. I didn't know that. He picked him up at the airport. You don't see that. When's the last time you saw a general manager / team president drive to the airport to pick up a player? It just doesn't happen all that often. So he loves James Harden, and this is the time that he's not going to give him that deal. So ownership obviously shut it down, and ownership said enough. We've had enough of this James Harden experiment. But there's got to be a fine line. And if so, Sean, does Daryl Morey say, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm not the guy, so I need out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The one other time in Daryl Morey's career where he kind of has been, I guess, overstepped by the general manager was in Houston, and then Daryl Morey was out the door shortly after that. It's interesting how this exactly went down. Like, I do think there is an argument to be made that Josh Harris, I don't want to say was necessary in the deal making, but had to ultimately drop the shoe and say, like, all right, let's just get this deal over with. Let's close this things. And I do think that owners are generally much more involved than people realize, that they have to be the one that sign off on deals. It's their team that is being run. And every owner manages things a little different as far as how hands-on or hands-off they are. There were two very funny lines in one of the reports. Scoop B reported this from Bally Sports, saying that there were other owners had got involved and told Josh Harris to stop worrying about his NFL team and take care of his NBA team, which I thought was a hilarious line there. I don't know. I do think that there's a part of this that, from a human being standpoint, Morey's definitely hurt from the Harden stuff. Like, as much as he deflected it and he had a very nice answer, these two are more intertwined legacy-wise than I think any general manager and player ever. That Morey and Harden were very much hand in glove as far as the just mindset of basketball, that really no player could have done what James Harden did with the style of play that Daryl Morey envisioned. Like, that isocentric 3-point, space the floor, this innovative offense that really did change basketball. And you can argue whether it's for the better or worse, but it was like really, I guess, influential to how the game is played nowadays. And I don't think really anyone else but James Harden could have reached it at this level. And I will still give them the credit that I think those Houston teams are better than they get remembered. It's tough when you're going against the buzzsaw that is the prime Golden State Warriors during that era. But James Harden took the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant to 7 games in the Western Conference Finals. Like, the Rockets were close during that point in time. And it's obviously a much different situation that at that point, everything was catered to Harden. You come to Philadelphia, and I don't want to hear all these sacrifice nonsense from James Harden. This is Joel Embiid's show that you come and joined and you are a significant part of. But I don't think that sat right with Harden. And I think Morey had the difficult spot. I think there's very much an angle of both Morey and Harden looked at each other and said, I know who this guy is. I know the bad things that he does, but they're not going to do it to me because that's my guy. And in the end, they both did to each other what they thought the other wouldn't. That Harden did cause a scene, and Morey did look at Harden as any other player. I have to look at him as his legitimate value for what he does to the team. And the right move was not to give him a max contract at this stage in his career. So they can kind of have this behind the scenes fight who knows if it's a blip in the radar, if this is a fractured relationship forever. And Morey had a nice line in the press conference too, where he's like, and at the end of the day, like, to be honest, who cares? Like, my job is to make the Sixers better. I appreciate you guys' concern for this, but like, I'm going to be focused on the job. So it's much messier than anyone would like. I do think that the Harden and Morey will be forever entwined and deserve to be to some extent. But yeah, I'm glad the whole circus is over to some extent.
Amen to that. Now, I watched the circus last night. James Harden was not in the lineup. He was in the building on the bench. And
Got
Sean,
quite a bit of screen time.
Oh yeah, definitely right about that. It is interesting, and look, one ball, a lot of mouths to feed, of course, with like offensive minded guys, but everything they kept on saying, it was hard to argue. It was just a matter of like, are you talking about winning a championship? Like, I can see James Harden being the guy who he was throughout the course of the regular season, but after that, like, don't talk to me about the Clippers winning a championship. Don't talk to me about these guys being healthy and everything coming together come April and May. It's not going to happen. But last night, all of a sudden, Kawhi Leonard couldn't miss, and he started off the season pretty hot. I think he was above 50% from downtown. Same thing with Paul George. Both of them were nailing everything from downtown. They're pulling away. They're up by double digits against the Lakers, but it didn't happen. They ended up losing last night because LeBron James at age 38 puts them on their back, goes into OT, scores 35. Unbelievable. You watched the game from start to finish. What was your big takeaway?
Yeah, it was a fun game. Paul George deserves a ton of credit for basically shooting the Clippers back in this team. The Clippers jumped out to a big lead. The Lakers fought back, took a lead themselves, and then Paul George kind of willed them back into it. He unfortunately fouled out on kind of a ticky-tack call when guarding LeBron late in that game, in overtime, I'm pretty sure, actually. And then Kawhi kind of drove the ship from there. It's interesting when you watch this Clippers team. Like, there's moments where you can absolutely see that they do need a point guard. They need a guy to run the offense. And if James Harden is bought into that role, if he wants to be a pure playmaker, I think it's going to be more similar to the role that he ran in Brooklyn, which he did at a very high level before getting hurt, than it would be to what he did in Philadelphia. But it takes Harden being bought in. And that's the biggest thing that I'm going to question. That we've only seen unselfish James Harden for short doses in short periods of time. That's not truly him as a basketball player. And as much as he wants to kind of pretend like that's the way he wants to play, it's just not in his ideal mindset. So if he can swallow his pride and fit in, it does make sense. He has a lot to play for from the contract standpoint, from his future standpoint, and for this team. So it's in everyone's best interest if that is the case. I think the biggest miscalculation on the Clippers is I don't think Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are either the defenders that they used to be. And I think in this kind of equation that they're building a contender is both those guys going to be relied on heavily to make up for the James Harden shortcomings. And Ivica Zubac is just not as fearsome as a rim protector as I think many kind of have him labeled to be. I get he's huge. He's like 7'1", but he doesn't really have these shot blocking instincts that he really should at that size. So they do have some weaknesses as a team. It's going to take some growing pains. And there's a huge part of me that feels bad for Russell Westbrook right now, which is weird because he's been through the ringer himself, but he's really kind of made an impact on this team and found his stride as a player again, being that second unit energy. And for a Clippers team, which has struggled to have their stars on the court on a nightly basis, Russ has been that guy that shows up every single night, gives 100%, and really has been playing positive basketball for the first time in several years of his career. I think James Harden basically ends that story right there, and that didn't seem to be the warmest welcome between those two when he walked in the locker room either. So a lot of egos, a lot of bodies, and it's going to take some massive growing pains. The bottom line is I just don't think that this team has enough there, and I think it was a misstep to make this trade.
Oof. Yeah, sounds like Steve Ballmer, got a little ahead of himself. And people are like, oh, they got to sell tickets in this new arena. There's a chance that none of them are back next year.
Yeah.
Talking about next year. Come on, man. All right. Well, hopefully Ty Lue's got good health insurance. That's all I know. Let's see here. Anything else? Oh, yeah, well, we're up against it. So let's just go ahead and do this, Sean. Great stuff, as always. Sean_Barnard with the number 1. I got 2 tweets I want to get to. Robin Plunder checking in. He says, Raps on road back-to-back. Didn't they have a back-to-back coming off an OT game in Chicago the first time the Sixers played them? What did they do to piss off the schedule makers? Yeah, that's a wild start. And that's why I kind of lean towards this one being an ugly one. I think the Sixers roll. I don't think the Raptors break 100 tonight. How about that?
I like that. As I mentioned, I think points are hard to come by for this Toronto squad. So I think that's a good bet. So maybe check the team total there.
Yeah, 119.97 is my final score. Give me a final score.
119.97. I'll go I'll go 109 109.91. I'm gonna go even lower on that. I think I do think this
Wow.
I do think this Raptors team just offense is gonna be their downfall as a team, that they're just gonna struggle to put the ball in the hoop. And they're in a difficult spot as a franchise too for what they go from here. They are definitely a team to watch from the Sixers standpoint as the trade deadline approaches.
I was gonna look for the exact score. I'll go ahead and post that at Sean_Brace. I'll put like $2 on each, and we'll see if we can cash in.
All right.
Always a fun play to get involved with the correct score. Good luck. All right. Once again, any final thoughts as far as the card? We got 4 games going off this evening. Of course, Suns are in action. That should be a good one as I pull it up right here, right now. Thursday, November 2nd. We got the Suns versus Wemby and the San Antonio Spurs. That's a rematch. That's a 9-point spread back in Phoenix. For this one, you got the Jazz and Magic. It's looking like the Magic right now are currently a 1.5 favorite, opened as a dog game in Utah. Something there. Also, the Pelicans and the Pistons, and the Pelicans ended up winning last night. Anything for you? Any of the other 3 games?
Pelicans are pretty banged up. Zion's not going to be playing tonight. Brandon Ingram's questionable. So that's one that I would probably say stay away from until there's some clarity on the injury report and probably just in general in that game if Zion's not suiting up. I do think the Suns kind of get their lick back after having that crazy ending in San Antonio the other night, which was one of the crazier endings. Kevin Durant just kind of coughing the ball up. They trailed that game for, I believe it was 49 minutes everything but the last 2 seconds is essentially how that game went down. But the ultimate what happened was the Spurs found a way to get the win. They're a scrappy, young, fun team. So I think tonight is a late night game worth staying up for, and I do think the Suns get the better of them.
Live action, I was told 90-1 at one point in that
Wow.
game.
Wow.
90-1, and the Spurs ended up winning that game. Was Kevin Durant fouled at the end?
He was not. I don't think he was. I'm glad they didn't call it, because that's a superstar bailout call that gets called a lot. But I think that was fine defense. They got the turnover, and those are the ones that I want to be played on. So I'm glad the whistles were swallowed.
Yeah, he came this way. It was just like the perfect match, and
it
took it away from him. Great stuff there. Great stuff from you. Sean Barnard, once again, picks and roll. You can catch the podcast at foxphlgambler.com. Good luck on all those plays. And I am off tomorrow, but we'll catch over the weekend and talk some more Sixers right here on the next episode of Picks and Roll.